What's up? What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. We are back. I do apologize for the mess up in the schedule. I'm going to make episodes up to you guys this week. I know I'm 2 members only in the can. We will get those to you. Me and Rob were down in Fort Lauderdale, down in Key West, getting a little bit of R&R over the weekend and doing some shows. Thanks to everybody who came out to the shows. Man, it is fun to go down to Key West in the middle of the winter when you live in the Northeast.
I told you it was fun down there. I wasn't lying. It's a good drinking town.
You were not. Oh my God. I can't even describe how good a drinking town it is. It's such a good drinking town. It's a dangerous town. You just sit there, you're flying. My wife came down and we hung out at this resort the whole weekend, and I'm like floating in the pool, and I'm like, all right, let's have our first drink, what is it? And then it's like 9:15 in the morning. All right, that might be a little bit early. Might be a little bit early to start, but we did, and we lived, and we're back.
If I went to a town in Russia and there were like 97-year-old women and they were all sitting around smoking cigarettes, I'd be like, cigarettes aren't that bad for you. They're all doing it here.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, they're fine.
And then you go down to Key West and they're all like 65. They look okay and they're drinking for breakfast. You're like, this can't be that bad.
Yeah, it was. It's dangerous. It's a dangerous game to play, but man, was it a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. I want to go back. I want to make that like a regular winter thing. We go down during the winter to Key West, get out of this for a little bit. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of stuff coming up, and also just a lot to talk about on today's episode. So let me try to do this as quickly as I can. Tomorrow night, I'm assuming it's happening as planned. I know there's some bad weather forecasts out here in New Jersey, but tomorrow night, I will be debating Josh Hammer at Princeton University on the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Very much looking forward to that. I believe it's pretty filled up, but I think there are a few seats available if you want to go. I just posted it on my Twitter. There's the link there. And then in a couple weeks, we will be in Houston, Texas at the Punchline. And then after that, at Helium Comedy Club in Buffalo, New York. Me and Robbie the Fire Bernstein are both really looking forward to those gigs. All right. So, obviously we were off for the second half of last week, and so a lot's happened, and there's a few things that I really wanted to make sure we talked about. Okay, let's start with this, which I just find very fascinating. And it has to do with Donald Trump's approval numbers. So look, I want to let you listen to CNN explain this because, well, for a lot of reasons. Number one, let's get some eyeballs on them. Not too many people watching. We can up those numbers a little bit. We'll probably double it just by playing this clip on the show. But also, it's interesting to watch even them admit this. And then maybe let's talk about what this means exactly. So let's go to the CNN clip. Let's let them say it first, and then we can respond.
CBS News out with a new poll showing that Americans seem to be liking what they're seeing, but it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I mean, look, but it's not just CBS. I like to take an average of the polls. And holy smokes, I mean, look at what the difference is between now versus 8 years ago during the first Trump term, right? This is Trump's net approval rating on February 10th. You go back to 2017, Trump was already underwater at -5 points on the net approval rating. That's approval minus disapproval. What a difference 8 years makes. He's on the positive side of the ledger at +4 points. And again, it's not just the CBS News poll. We're talking about the Gallup poll. We're talking about the Ipsos poll. We are talking about the Pew poll. All of these respective pollsters have Trump in a better position now than they did 8 years ago. The bottom line is Americans are far more likely to say they like what they're seeing now versus what they felt during Trump's first term.
Okay, so how rare is this? Are you going to show us sort of where we're at now and how rare it is that this number changes?
I want you to take a look at this plus sign, right? Compare that to the negative sign. Being on the plus size of
they really
the ledger,
do talk to you
right?
like you're idiots,
in
huh?
Positive net approval territory. A positive net approval rating for Donald Trump. Again, whoa. Entire first term, just 11 days. Donald
This feels
Trump
like the
had a
SNL
net
run
positive
faster.
approval rating.
It
Compare
really is.
that to the second term, just so far. Every
we get
single
it.
day
It
of
just
Trump's
doesn't.
second term so far, he has been on the positive side of the ledger. 21 days, all 3 weeks. That's already 10 more days than he was in his entire
we get it.
term. So again, this is just another sign that Americans are far more likely to like what they're seeing in
this is
2%
milk. It's not like the 1%. There's a whole nother percentage of milk in there.
His second term, so
Here,
it stands to
I just
reason
want to
that
get this
there would be
next
more
number out
people
there,
that
but it
would
is funny how they talk to you like you're a fucking
some of what he's
retard.
doing. Is there something that Americans say about why it is that they like him now more than they did back in the first term?
You know, I think one of the things that's so important for politicians is for folks to believe what they're saying and that they're keeping their campaign promises. So I think this gives you a pretty gosh darn good idea of what may be going on. Trump's doing what he promised to do. You go back to April of 2017, it was just 46% of all Americans who said that Trump was doing what he promised to do. Compare that now to February of 2025. You know, there was a good show that was on during the 1990s called A Different World. That is what's going on right now. We're living in a different world. 70% of Americans say Trump is doing what he promised to do.
We can
And act now. I'll throw in another stat you don't need.
It is, by the way, it is almost before you even get to the substance of these polls, which is it's very interesting. But before you even get to that, it is hard to not just be like, what does CNN think of the intelligence of their viewer? That they actually, it's the way I'd explain this to my 6-year-old, is like how they talk to you about it. It's like I get plus minus. I know the difference. You don't have to. And why does it help for him to underline it? Like as if I couldn't see. There's 2 numbers on the screen. And then he has to go, no, let me underline. Now you see the first number? Okay, now here's the second number. The second number is higher. And so you understand. It's like, yeah, no, I get it.
This is too inside baseball, but that guy's like if you combine the ShamWow guy with Modi.
If you know Modi, the stand-up comedian, it's a solid reference. There's 5 people out there who really enjoyed that. But it is okay. So there's that part, which is just kind of funny. But there is something to watching these poll numbers, to watching Donald Trump. And by the way, you know, they were comparing it to his poll numbers at the very beginning of his first term. I think they had April 2017 in there, so a little bit further than where he is this time. But that doesn't even count his poll numbers that fell dramatically lower over the next years of his administration. So Donald Trump, according to these polls, is starting from like a much stronger place than essentially he's ever been. That is very interesting. I also will say this, and look, I'm speculating a little bit when I talk about this. So I'm throwing this out there more as something to think about than I have a definitive take on this. But one of the major themes that we talked about on the show quite a bit throughout the election, which really was an election unlike any other that I've lived through. And one of the things that I would just notice a lot was that every sign around you, everything you could observe or touch or taste or feel just told you that this was Trump's year. Like that Donald Trump was running away with this thing. Whether you were looking at crowd sizes or, crowd reactions to Donald Trump, anything you could feel in the popular culture throughout the entire campaign, it just felt like it was all going in Donald Trump's direction. And yet the entire time, the major pollsters, the ones being cited here, whatever, CBS was the poll they started with there, and then they mentioned Gallup and I think ABC and CNN and a few others. All of these polls told us all election long this was a coin flip. It was a coin flip. I mean, he was up a little bit against Joe Biden, but then once Kamala Harris came in, she went up for a little bit, and then it came back to just being a coin flip of a race, according to them. Everything you could observe was telling you this is all Donald Trump. All the pollsters were telling you this is a coin flip. And then on election day, you have Donald Trump winning the popular vote in every single swing state. Reality was much closer to what we could observe than it was to what these pollsters are telling you. And I gotta say, I know none of this is scientific. This is why I said I'm just speculating about this stuff. But you see Donald Trump go to UFC events. You see him go to the Super Bowl. You see him go to all these things. Again, not a random sample. It's a particular slice of America that's going to UFC events or going to the Super Bowl. But he's met like a king. Like people are just so thrilled. They're so on board with him. And, I think about, again, this is nothing scientific about this, but there was that There was right after inauguration, you saw there was that video clip of Tucker Carlson walking through the streets of Washington, D.C., and he's getting like a hero's welcome. Like I would have a couple years ago thought it would be dangerous for Tucker Carlson to walk the streets of Washington, D.C. And now that people are chanting as he walks by, "We love you, Tucker," you know? And there is just, I'm just saying, it makes me wonder what's really going on here. You know, it seems like the polls always very consistently from the beginning have like Donald Trump's always outperforms what the polls are saying he does. And when even the polls now are admitting that he is in the positive in his job approval ratings, or that 70% of Americans think he's coming through on the things that he ran on, it makes me wonder what the real number is. And if it's possible that the real number is actually much, much higher than this. Just something I'm thinking about.
What's more interesting to me than the poll number is just during COVID, they lied and they pretended like everyone was getting vaccinated. You're crazy if you weren't.
Yep.
They lied to pretend that Donald Trump couldn't possibly win against Hillary Clinton because they wanted to convince you, don't waste your vote, be on the winning side, vote for Hillary Clinton. We know now from USAID, Politico was getting checks, BBC was getting checks. Their entire game is to try and pretend like everything is in the world of normal, and if you don't agree with them, and that's why they repeat things as much as they do, that's the propaganda machine. It's interesting that CNN would give any favorable coverage to him whatsoever, and I'm almost surprised to see them reporting on this, same as they didn't report on border stats for a long time during the Biden administration. So it's almost more surprising, like more than the indicator of the poll, the fact that CNN is forced to cover it in a favorable way and not just go, my God, I guess 5% more of the country's racist now, that he's actually ahead in the polling, to me is the more remarkable story.
Right, but that's what makes you wonder if it's a limited hangout of sorts, where it's like, well, we have to at least admit this to cover up the much bigger story, you know, which is a technique that they use. You know what I mean? Like they will admit to 10% of the scandal so that okay, yes, this did get a little out of our hands. We're rolling that back to kind of let the wind out of the you know, let the air out of the movement that's furious about the other 90%. So if even that's what makes me think that if they're even admitting that this guy is in the positive in his job approval rating, then perhaps it's them covering up the story that he's way in the positive. Again, as we've said for a while now, you know, when this guy says we live in a different world, I did enjoy that show, by the way. When he says we live in a different world, it's like, well, why are we in a different world? And really the obvious answer here is that we lived under 4 years of Joe Biden. And it's impossible to not contrast Donald Trump with the last administration. Like with all administrations, it's impossible to not, to some degree, contrast them with the last one. And by any objective measure, Donald Trump, by just existing, is so much better than Joe Biden.
We're also not 3 weeks into hearing about how he's a Russian asset. So it's I mean, they're also, the polls just started. Let's see if he goes and he redevelops Gaza and what that does for his polling.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. Obviously, we have to weigh in on the Gaza.
But if you just think of how much of a change it is from cooking up a fake Russia collusion story to actually reporting, hey, the American people like this guy so much, that to me, that's a massive change. Going from the entire media apparatus just undermining you to actually giving the honest information of, wait, people like this guy?
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, it's like, why? Look, I guess I'll start with this, right? Because what you said there, even about the Gaza thing, and we'll get into the specifics of that in a second, but it does let you know, like, look, Donald Trump is in there right now, and he's got, let's just say, a lot of, certainly from our perspective, a lot of good things that he wants to do, right? Like he wants the economy to be booming. He wants to get illegal immigration under control. He wants, I think on some level, for there to not be foreign wars like this. He wants to end the war in Ukraine. You know, the stuff in the Middle East is a little bit more not great, but having DOGE, I mean, wanting, you know, to kind of audit the federal government and cut spending and reveal corruption within government. There's all of these great things. And right now he's got a strong approval rating. He's got this kind of mandate behind him. He's got the energy and the vibe shift behind him. And it feels like, look, there's going to be a moment of coming back down to reality. There will be some point. Trump will mess something up. There will be something unpopular that he does. This is kind of the way it always goes with presidents, no matter who they are. But you can't overstate how much you need to not fall into one of these potential disasters, because that's what could really ruin all of this. If you can keep this up where you're somewhat popular and the corporate media and the old regime, the shadow government, they seem to kind of be out of bullets in their chamber. It seems like they just don't have another thing to go to. I mean, like, you know, like as you mentioned, Robin, you're absolutely right. What were they doing last time around? Well, they were smearing him as a Russian spy. That was their game for the first Trump term. But after Russiagate completely fell apart and after COVID was just exposed for all the lies that were told, it seems like they don't have another big one of those to go to. Like, what are they going to say? He's a Russian spy again? You know, like, it just doesn't seem possible. And in that environment, there's when I say that, like, there's never been an opportunity to actually see a positive agenda moved forward for the country like we have right now. There's never been anything even remotely close. Like, there's just never been anything like this before, particularly with some of the stuff that's going on at DOGE, which I want to get into a little bit more. But that's part of the reason why it's so important that Trump doesn't fall into one of these disasters. And what would the disasters be? Well, the pretty obvious ones right now would be getting into another catastrophic war in the Middle East, or getting into an escalated confrontation with Russia. These seem to be the real dangers that are right in front of Donald Trump right now. So if he can avoid that, then we can continue with this positive agenda where things that, again, I can't really stress this enough, things that would have seemed like libertarian pipe dreams 2 years ago are now being discussed by people with enormous influence and power. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. We've all seen the headlines: cyber attacks on the power grids, drones flying in the sky, constant instability around the world. If you are anything like me, you want to make sure that no matter what happens, your family is protected, and that's why I trust My Patriot Supply. Their 4-week emergency food kit is a must-have. It gives you the nutrition you need to stay strong in a crisis. With 2,000 calories per day and 100% of your daily value of 12 essential vitamins and minerals, the kit keeps you going when every meal matters. Right now, they're offering $50 off their 4-week food kits. Go to preparewithsmith.com to grab yours now. Don't put this off. Now is the time to prepare. Preparewithsmith.com to get your 4-week food kit today. All right, let's get back into the show. I don't know. Did you see this? Our very own Liam McCullum. Did you see what Elon Musk said to him? Let's pull that tweet up, Natalie, so people can just look at this. This is what I'm talking about. As there are libertarians who want to fight about the latest drama on the LNC or like whatever, some ridiculous factionalism. Our own Liam McCullum, guest on this show, great, one of the most talented young libertarians out there in the country. He tweets out, DOGE and Elon Musk should let Ron Paul lead a Federal Reserve audit team, to which Elon Musk replies, good idea. Elon Musk also recently shared like an entire episode of the Ron Paul's Liberty Report, his show, and to his 130 million Twitter followers or whatever it is he has, you have the richest man in the world, one of the most influential men in the world, who's in charge of this, you know, kind of imaginary department, but seems to be turning it into some real things. He's in charge of it. He is sharing the message of Ron Paul. He just tweeted out this phenomenal Milton Friedman video where he's talking about how the only issue that matters is government spending, and that ultimately is the tax, and it doesn't really matter whether they tax you for it or print the money to make it up. They're still taxing you for it. Even if they borrow the money, they're just promising to tax you in the future for it. So the only thing that matters is cutting government spending. Like, I'm sorry, but as somebody who's been in this libertarian world for 2007 is when I got into it. So what is this? 18 years I've been in this libertarian world. And this is a wet dream, man. that our ideas would ever be shared on this like large of a platform. The whole thing back then was that Ron Paul got into the presidential debates and they would never give him much time. They'd give him like 7 minutes total. But in those 7 minutes, he could say some awesome shit that would just be like, yo, that stole the debate. And then the internet was the only way you could spread it because the corporate media would black him out. This was the Jon Stewart joke, if you remember. Why are they pretending Ron Paul is the 13th floor of a hotel? Because they would literally, Jon Stewart literally plays this clip from CNN where they go, Mitt Romney is now in the polls. Mitt Romney is now the favorite to be the Republican nominee, knocking Michelle Bachmann down to third. And then Jon Stewart's like, who's number 2? They would just not tell you. Like they would literally report on 1 and 3 and leave out 2. It was they just wanted to make sure no one heard this guy's message. And now people are hearing this guy's message from like this huge being amplified on the biggest platform. Like that alone is so valuable. But also Elon Musk has like found this team of like tech geniuses to really like go over the numbers, and he's openly talking about auditing the Federal Reserve. I just can't explain how great that is. And you know that's part of these things are all related. Like Donald Trump's approval ratings being high is like a necessary component to be able to do anything positive with this shit, because you have to have somewhat of a popular mandate. That's at least part of it. You know, like we've always said for years, right, that you would need these different aspects to come together in order to ever have anything positive happen in DC. Like one, you would need popular will behind the ideas. Like you would need people who were who had been broken out of the government propaganda and were kind of like aware of how corrupt and criminal it was. And then you would also need like, you know, elites. You would need like some billionaire who's like gets on board and is like, yes, I'm going to fund this thing. I'm going to get behind it. I'm going to put resources into this. And we just kind of seem to see, at least possibly, a lot of these things coming together right now. Like, oh, we have that component now. Oh, we have that component. It's a pretty exciting time. Also, and I know, Rob, you got to love this. The reaction to DOGE in many ways says it all. Like the fact that everyone's freaking out so much about the fact that these books might be opened. We might actually be able to look and see what you're spending our money on and then maybe even roll some of it back. And you see the freak out from people. You could, if you got that, there's the other video that I sent you, Natalie. I think that I didn't put in the order for today, but it's the one with Kara Swisher, who I was just arguing with on Piers Morgan. We don't have to go to it right now, but if you want to just pull that one up. But isn't it interesting, Rob, as somebody who you've been talking about this stuff for a long time, to see people actually talking in a serious way about government spending, and then to see it's the first one I sent you. No, not that one. It's up on the text thread. It was the one that I had sent you right at 8:14 a.m. this morning. Right after I told you that I've decided to move. Yes, that's the one. Right after I told you that I was staying in Key West forever and I quit everything. That was my next text after that. But hold on one second on that. But any thoughts on what we were saying, Rob?
What about the
just DOGE and the freak out or any of it?
One of the parts of the freak out, which is incredible, is the people going, "Hey, this is such a small portion of our of how much money we spend." And he goes, "Wait, so are you against cleaning up fraud and abuse?
Yeah.
You think we should just let that slide?" I mean, it seems like the low-hanging fruit to clean that up. And where's the Bernie Sanders screaming about with the millionaires, the billionaires? Well, what about the people who became millionaires because of a government check that just goes into a thing? What about those people? Yeah. You got a problem with the free market millionaires, but not the green energy New Deal people, the Obama thing that just went under in California. What about all the people with favorable government contracts? What about all the people that constitute the 1% because they're just getting these government checks through backdoor handouts for, transgender research in Jamaica?
Dude, it's such a great point. I mean, I don't even remember the numbers offhand. But somebody please correct me if I'm wrong about this. And I'm sure Bernie Sanders said something vague about the transfer of wealth during COVID. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure he had some comment about like, oh, we're creating more billionaires and that's why we need to tax them, or that's why we need more government programs. But did he ever once like say like, hey, well, I think it was like 40 new pharma billionaires were created during COVID. You know what? Sorry, I said it like Bernie Sanders during COVID. But you know what I'm saying? There was something. It was something like that. Like dozens of new pharmaceutical billionaires were created during COVID. Did Bernie Sanders ever have a problem with that? You know, it's like he never seems to really highlight the billionaires that are created by government and make that argument. Because like at the very least, if that was your concern, you'd think you should have been against all the COVID policies, right? It's the largest transfer of wealth in human history from the working and middle class to the elite. And yet you have no issue with that. They just think, look, and I think this kind of says it all right here, but if you just really zoom out and think about DOGE and the reaction to it, okay? These are just like some objective facts, right? The US federal government is the biggest organization in the history of the world, okay? By any measurement. We spend about $7 trillion a year, and we are something like $36 trillion in debt right now, maybe approaching $37 trillion in debt, okay? Biggest organization in the history of the world, spends more money than anybody else in the history of the world, and has accumulated more debt than any other organization in the history of the world. And as soon as anybody even suggests modest cuts, or even just opening the books, everyone in this town loses their freaking mind and says it's going to be the end of the world. And that, in fact, this is the corruption. The corruption is opening the books. The corruption is cutting any government spending. Think about for a second how fucking ass backward that is. You know, it's like, look, the whole thing here, the whole game is that this is big government. I mean, this is what it is. And people can sit here and they can say, as some kind of like right-wing reactionary types will argue at times, they'll say that like, well, it doesn't really matter how big or small the government is. It matters how corrupt they are. It matters how good they are. But libertarians always had the answer to that. Like from way back, that was always the point. It was like, yeah, but that's why you don't want the thing to be giant, because if it goes corrupt, then you're screwed. And so they're like, no, the problem isn't that it was so big. The problem is that it went corrupt. No, the problem was that it was so big and it went corrupt. If it wasn't a gigantic organization, it wouldn't matter that much that it went corrupt. This is the whole game. The whole game is that they operate in secrecy and they have enormous power. That's it. All this wealth is extracted from the American people and given to this corrupt organization. And so for that issue to finally, so long overdue, for that issue to finally be in the forefront is just amazing to watch. And I gotta say, I really enjoy watching the people spaz out over it. Because just look at like what they're reduced to arguing. Here, look at this. Let's play that clip. I forget the other guy's name, but Kara Swisher is the one I was just arguing with on Piers Morgan. She was saying dumb shit to me, and here they are saying more dumb shit to other people.
I want to know who are these young, highly intelligent, highly motivated zealots following them into these buildings and shutting off payments to schools and Head Starts. I want to know their names.
Well, you know, they're trying to, the local officials are trying to make that official. The newly installed Trump are threatening people for naming their names, just so you know. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah, but they can unmask CIA officers who put their lives in harm's way to try and keep our Americans safe. I want to know who their names are, and I want to see Democratic governors saying, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to use the full faith and to the letter of the law to put you folks in prison. I think what you're doing is trespassing. I think this is a coup. And be clear, just because the new insurrectionist who was elected, you know, I don't believe this is legal. And I'm going to hold the people accountable who are trespassing and a part of a coup accountable. To just sit back and say this is horrible and this is unlawful, we need to go gangster here and say,
there you go.
Look, we are not negotiating around this stuff. This is illegal. This is a coup. This is the unlawful seizure of power. We are not going to engage in these bullshit, ridiculous arguments over Gaza and Greenland. We are going to hold the people accountable. Here are their names. Here are their faces.
All right, we can pause it here. But there's, of course, we're now conflating Gaza and Greenland with DOGE or something like that. It's a coup, Rob. It's another insurrection. This time, the coup is when a president is democratically elected and does what he ran on doing. That's a coup, you understand. It's a coup when the guy who's democratically elected wants to open the books on the shadow government of non-democratically elected bureaucrats and spies. You see, that's what a coup is. Right? See, I'm oversaying. The same people who will say that I'm overplaying my hand when I call the Maidan Revolution a coup because the U.S. pumped tens of millions of dollars into a protest movement to overthrow a democratically elected president. That's not a coup. A coup, you understand, Rob, is when you go against the good men and women of the CIA who just want to protect Americans. Now, this is like, it's so pathetic, the game here too, because the other aspect, which he kind of touched on there, is that they go like you're getting rid of charity, essentially. If you want to bring down USAID or something like that, then they'll point to like one thing where they bought some kids some meals and be like, oh look, you didn't want these kids to starve. But this is on the level of if the mafia would buy, like, as they always did, right? They'd buy like a waste management plant or something like that. And then you go, oh, we're shutting down the mafia, because they're like killing all these people and robbing from all these people and doing all this organized crime that they're kind of known for. And you went, oh, so you just want everyone's toilets to overflow. You just want everyone to be shitting in buckets. And you're like, no, maybe we could do that part without the murder. You know what I mean? Like maybe that's really what we want to shut down, but that's what they're trying to convince you of now. That in fact, right? That look, even when you think about the most drastic cuts that have been proposed, right? Like I think when Vivek Ramaswamy was still with DOGE, I think they had proposed $2 trillion in cuts. $2 trillion in cuts would take us to like 2017 levels of government. It would just be going back to pre-pandemic, which, by the way, this is how it always works, the ratchet effect of big government. There's some emergency, and they go, look, we need record high government spending for that emergency, and then that becomes the new baseline. And then we increase from there, right? So like if we had to turn government spending way up in 2020 during COVID, that was the justification. Well, why can't we go back to 2019 now? Isn't COVID over? Oh, no, that's just normal forever now. Same with George W. Bush's spending levels after 9/11. It's an emergency. There's 9/11. We have to increase government spending. And by the way, we're never going back down. We've never seen pre-9/11 levels of spending since then. Obama, the 2008 fiscal crash, the answer to that was the stimulus package. Again, the same thing. Just a different word for the same thing. Increase government spendings. Do we ever go back to the George W. Bush level spending? Nope. And by the way, just to be clear, when Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy proposed a $2 trillion cut, they're not proposing we go back to the pre-9/11 levels. They're not proposing we go back to the pre-2008 crash levels. They're proposing we go back to the pre-COVID levels. And we're supposed to act like in 2017, when the biggest, most powerful organization to ever exist was the US federal government. That somehow if we go back to that now, that is the wild, wild west. You know what I mean? That is cutting government to the bone, and we could never survive on that. It's all bullshit. It's all an illusion. The truth is we could go way smaller than that, and we would just be better off for it.
I remember that guy was a real douche on COVID as well, and
Okay.
I'd like to see him regrow his hair because I don't like him bringing such badness to our bald community.
When there's so many great bald leaders out there,
yeah,
and yet Larry David, that's all I can think of. But I'm sure there's others.
He's not representing our community well,
That's true.
So I'd like to disavow him. And same as I've disavowed some Jews and said I don't like those Jews. That guy doesn't represent me or my fellow balds.
That guy does not represent true baldness.
Yeah.
The message of true baldness was always one of limited government and peace and prosperity. I agree with you completely.
Now, my second thought on this is that, I kind of look at DOGE. If I worked in an office, some boss came out and said, hey, we're selling the following product, and you think they're being a little bit too aggressive with the marketing, but then it turns out the customers are real happy with the product, and you go, all right, I don't really like the way we marketed this, but I guess everyone's happy, so it worked.
Yep.
I don't know that I love the DOGE mechanism. I don't know that look at what happened with the Hunter Biden thing. You had the Republicans investigating that forever. I listened to that cattle rancher a million times talk about 20 companies, this, that, or the next thing. It could be Elon Musk with his three wizards and some AI algorithms can actually cut through the entire government's budget and tell us where all the fraud and abuse is going to. And I don't understand how you take the other side of that we should not get rid of the fraud and abuse from government. Like you were saying, where's the cue? Like if that's the end result, so fine. Maybe there'd be a better mechanism for how to clean this up, and maybe Elon Musk, even if he's appointed by the president, shouldn't be allowed to have a private company also. Maybe, but even so, there are government contracts. Microsoft has a government contract for the cloud, or maybe it's Amazon at this point. So, and he's not even getting paid for this work. So and it's from the directive of the president. But so all I'm saying is, even if you take issue with the mechanism that it's Elon Musk doing it, what about the end result that we've seen so far do you think is against the American people?
Listen, I would totally be open to the argument that this is not the ideal mechanism if anybody could present me with a plausible alternative to where maybe we'd get some of this action from. Yes, you're right. Strictly speaking, this should come from the Congress, and the Congress should be abolishing all these organizations, auditing all these organizations, but that ain't happening. And so, I would rather some of the things that Donald Trump's done through executive order, I'd rather they be done by the legislative branch and let him sign it into law. That would certainly, if you wanted to end birthright citizenship, or if you wanted to, ban men from competing with women in sports, or if you wanted to do it, it'd be better off to have legislation that the next president can't just undo with an executive action. Okay. Present it's like I want to audit the Federal Reserve. Thomas Massie just introduced a great bill to audit the Federal Reserve. Okay, is that going to pass? Because then if not, I got to be honest, I think I'm against tyranny. I'm for individual liberty and natural rights. I'm against tyranny. I'm not that picky at this point about what method is used to roll back the tyranny and advance individual rights. I don't know. I just don't really think we're in a position to be picky about the methodology.
It'd be tough to say, let's say Elon Musk just made these recommendations of, hey, I found the following fraud, and now Congress has to decide not to fund that fraud, which would then be pretty ridiculous of Congress to go, no, we're going to continue to send checks to the BBC. We're going to continue to buy Politico memberships at $40,000 for a subscription. Right. We're going to continue to send trans money down to Afghanistan.
Right.
I don't even understand the argument, though, that if Donald Trump wants to give data access to somebody to expose fraud and abuse, that should be illegal, or that should be considered a coup, or that in some way it's dangerous. Can you explain to me how the access to what should be public and transparent data is dangerous?
Yeah.
Or how someone who's probably has better and more secure technology than I bet the BlackBerries or whatever the government's working with. And if you're the president, you can declassify information. So if you can declassify information, how can you not say, hey, I want this person to be able to access this data?
Well, as the guy, as your fellow Baldy was saying to you, Rob, he goes, I don't even want to argue about this. There's a reason why he doesn't want to argue about this, because you have no argument.
Yeah, present the case. What is the what is the danger
you
here?
You just say it's a coup, but also, by the way, and this is where you realize it is something. I mean, I've been beating this drum for so many years at this point, but it's just so true that this is not a left versus right issue. This is like an establishment versus dissident issue. This is a who wants to protect the regime and who wants to restore the republic.
Yeah, that guy probably has a USAID check. Yeah, because he's been out shilling some bullshit and he doesn't want his money turned off.
Look, it's one thing. It's one of the things that I find to be unfortunate that still exists, is that people just get. And I'm not saying like left and right aren't useful concepts. They certainly are, but it's when you'll see a lot of the Trump supporters like the left is freaking out or something like this. Look. If the CIA is brought up and your definition of the CIA in your head is these great American patriots who are just out trying to save people's lives, and you're going to unmask them, like as if it's taken as an a priori given that the CIA are just the good guys. And so if they do anything in secret, then you're the bad guy for trying to reveal their secrecy. Think about that. That is not a left or a right-wing position. That is I am a defender of the regime position, period. And nobody. How brain dead would you have to be to actually believe that? Who thinks that that's what the CIA does? Just a team of good guys. Just a team of good guys who are always out trying to protect Americans. That's just what they're driven by. It's Jack Bauer is real life. That's what they're doing. They're just always trying to torture the truth out of somebody so that we save everyone's lives. Who doesn't recognize that the CIA is a paramilitary organization that lies the American people into war after war after war, that commits covert military actions that are not totally undemocratic, that are not even decided by our democratic leaders most of the time? I mean, come on. Exposing the secrecy and the corruption of the CIA makes you the good guy, not the bad guy. And if you have the opposite worldview, then I'm sorry, that's not a left-wing position. That's just an evil defender of the regime. And I wouldn't be surprised if you don't want to debate about that, because who the hell would want to take that position in a debate? All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Public Rec. Guys, you gotta try the Game Changer pants from Public Rec. If you are sick of stiff office pants where you feel awful, this is what you gotta check out. Now you can feel like you're just relaxing in your sweatpants, but you still look appropriate at the office party or at a function where you're supposed to be dressed up. This is the type of thing that I would really go for. I don't have an office job, so I'm able to be comfortable most of the time. But if you do have an office job, go check out the Game Changer pants. They'll be your new go-to. Public Rec not only has the most comfortable pants ever made in many different styles, but they also have a huge selection of high quality everyday basics. You can revamp your entire wardrobe with the perfect fitting polos, shorts, and hoodies. These are the most comfortable dress pants you will ever wear in your life. So now you can actually look good while not having to sacrifice comfort. So stop suffering in regular pants. And for a limited time only, our listeners will get 20% off when they use the promo code PROBLEM at checkout. That's 20% off with the promo code PROBLEM at publicrec.com. And after you purchase, if they ask where you heard about this, make sure to mention that you heard about it on the Part of the Problem podcast. Publicrec.com, promo code PROBLEM for 20% off. All right, let's get back into the show. Okay. Yep, site crashed for a second, but we're back up and running, guys. All right, let's move on here, because I do want to make sure we hit both of these things. And this is what happens when we're off for too long. I'm backed up, and I want to make sure we get all of this. So first, we haven't yet, so we got to talk about the Trump Gaza proposal, which look, I just start.
That's our rubble. Our bombs made it. We own it now. We demolished the area. We're going to rebuild it.
It really is, right? Israel breaks it, we buy it. I guess that is the lesson to be learned. If you break it, you buy it, but the you is Israel, and then the other you has to be us. Look, man, and like I say this as somebody who just said everything I've said on the show so far, and somebody who supported Trump in this election and is just, cautiously optimistic, but incredibly hopeful about what could actually be accomplished in this administration. I do not think this plan is going to happen. I think it is almost inconceivable that he could actually get Egypt and Jordan to take in the Palestinians from Gaza. But I to be clear here, this is about as awful a proposal as any president could make. And this is part of what's so horrible about it is that it has the potential to ruin all these other positives. Like if Donald Trump actually were to try to go through with something like this, this could really sink his administration. It could plunge America into another just catastrophic quagmire, and it could undo all of the good things he's done and all of the potential good things that he could do with this high approval rating and this new mandate and all the energy behind the Trump administration. So, man, I don't think this is actually going to happen. I think this is kind of a Trump first, whatever. It's like the way his mind works is that he's a real estate developer. So he goes, oceanfront property, money could be made off this. He's floating out an idea that I think he believes is going to put pressure on the other Arab nations. But even that is just terrible, because that's not really who needs pressure put on them. Like the idea that you're pressuring any of these other countries, look, even someone said to me when I was trashing this idea on Twitter, and someone said to me, "No, Dave, what he's really doing is putting pressure on Saudi Arabia to come to the table now and to negotiate in good faith." It's like, dude, go look at Saudi Arabia's proposed peace plan It was totally reasonable already. They took the same. I mean, it's pretty easy to propose a peace plan in this region because the same plan has been on the table so many times before, which is what, 67 borders, like a 2-state solution. Like, you guys have to stop occupying Palestine. Palestine has to stop suicide bombing people in Israel. Like, that is everybody knows what the solution is. But the idea that people are saying, which is what seems to me to be the most common defense of this insane proposal that Donald Trump floated out, which is like, got to try something new, got to shake it up. The status quo hasn't been working. It's like, okay, well, I agree with you on that. What exactly is the status quo? Oh yeah, the status quo is unconditionally supporting Israel in no matter what they want to do. Even if what they want to do is against what the president wants them to do, they'll still get their check in the mail. They'll still get their bombs in the mail. I don't think you send bombs by mail, but you get my point. That's been the status quo. So you want to shake things up and try something new? Okay, how about America not funding Israel anymore? That's something new. How about a Palestinian state? That would be something new. So don't just just to shake things up and try something new doesn't mean we will go ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of Palestine for you, Israel, since that's been your goal all along. It's like, oh, I don't know, like, I'm all for, I saw when Michael Knowles was defending it the other day, and he said that, he goes, well, the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And it's like, yeah, okay, but that doesn't mean that the definition of sanity is you just suggest anything that's different than the same thing. Like, yes, if you have a headache and you take Advil every single day and the headache won't go away, then yeah, taking Advil the next day and thinking the headache is going to go away maybe is a little bit insane to think the same thing is going to work this time when it hasn't worked. But that doesn't mean hitting yourself in the head with a hammer is a great proposal. You know what I mean? Like, just because it's different doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And no, this would be, oh my God, first of all, the idea, it's so not based in reality. The idea that you're going to get Egypt and Jordan to take in the Palestine. By the way, one thing you might have noticed from the press conference, Rob, is that Trump said all of them, and he said either 1.6 or 1.7 million. Which, by the way, the latest numbers were that there were 2.3 million people in Gaza. And so I'm just saying, I don't know exactly where he got these numbers from, but I've always said from the very beginning of this that the people who were arguing over whether the Ministry of Health's numbers were accurate or inaccurate, that this was all a complete non-point, and that if you just look at what Israel's doing here and you look at the population density and you look at the number of bombs that they've dropped, that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people who die as a result of this. And it's a lot of them die, which is what always happens in war. A lot of them die from secondary effects. Like they don't necessarily die because a bomb dropped right on top of them and killed them. They might die because they couldn't get medical treatment because all the medical resources have been exhausted due to the war. You know what I mean? Like you blow up hospitals, people die for unrelated reasons. And so anyway, it's an interesting window into what the real numbers are there. But Donald Trump makes the point that, these other countries will take them and then we can go in there and build up big. But look, here's the bottom line. How are you going to make them leave? I mean, they've stayed through all of this. They've stayed through decades and decades and decades of brutal occupation, of brutal blockades. How are you going to make them leave? And if the U.S. owns it, as Donald Trump said, we're taking it over, the assumption would be that we have to make them leave. So you're saying what? We're going to send the U.S. military in to now fight a war with Hamas? Something that Israel's been unable to eliminate Hamas by all intelligence reporting. So what, we're going to take that on now? And also, is there any thought at all to understanding that this has been at the center of the Muslim world's beef with America? This is the reason why we've had to deal with the Al-Qaeda problem, why we had to have this terrorism issue to begin with. Do you have any idea how much that will increase if we were to actually go in and just transparently, nakedly finish the ethnic cleansing for Israel? It's a disastrous proposal. And I truly hope it ends soon. They're even entertaining this. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this, Rob.
It seems particularly cruel. And for as much as I fought back on the sanctity of borders and Putin talk, because of all the things we've been doing in the world, And there was, I think we provoked him, and
Sure.
we're moving a military close to him. But the idea of Israel being able to bomb its neighbors out of the territory and then just keep it seems like it shouldn't be part of the world in 2025.
Yeah. Well, listen, here's let's play here. Donald Trump did elaborate more on this for some people who were arguing with me that he wasn't saying that Palestinians would get kicked out.
Some of the things he was saying in the Netanyahu conference also, where he goes, the Palestinian people have just been unlucky, and no matter how long they're going to be here, it's like he's just describing as if this was the result of an alien invasion.
But you're sitting next to the guy who did it.
Yeah.
You're sitting next to him and going, the place has been destroyed. It's unlivable. It's horrible that people have to live like that. And he's like, yeah, no, I agree. You totally should kick him out for us now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Donald Trump, he speaks in kind of coded language, but at the same time, I know who this guy has always been, what his position on Israel has always been. I know the people that he has around him in his cabinet. And I know that Miriam Adelson, our Palestinian friend, gave him $100 million. Okay. So it's like, people are like, oh, he's not really saying this. He's saying this. It's like, it seems much more likely this is actually what he's saying. He said Gaza would be for the people of the region, but that the Palestinians would have to go.
Yeah.
So if it's not for the Palestinians, who are these people of the region that it's for? Sounds like Israelis would be the answer to that. Okay. And here, a bunch of people were arguing with me on Twitter. No. He's just saying relocate them while we clean up all the mines and then they can go back in. Well, here is Donald Trump addressing that on his Super Bowl interview with Brett Baer.
We'll build beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them, because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could ever. It's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. We give them billions and billions of dollars a year. We'll build beautiful communities.
So, just to be clear, this is what he's saying. We'll build them big, beautiful refugee camps, and they'll love them so much. They'll love the refugee camps in Egypt so much that they will, I don't know, whatever. And I got to tell you, I also do think, for people who argue with me about this and they're like, no, this is art of the deal stuff. Well, first of all, it doesn't make any sense. He's not putting pressure on the people you'd need to put pressure on to actually get to the right deal at the end of this. And number two, I do not think there's any practical way that this can be pulled off. He can sit here and say, oh, we give foreign aid to Egypt and Jordan. That is true. And people will point out, like, they'll go, oh, well, look, Dave, he was able to threaten tariffs on Mexico and Canada and get them to send 10,000 troops each, to the border. And so, look, he's going to get these concessions out of them. I understand when people feel that way. All you're really saying is that you don't understand the region at all, and you don't understand the history, and you don't understand the issues here. And it's fine. Not everybody has to. But it is such a wildly different ask to ask Egypt and Jordan to take in nearly 2 million people than it is to ask Mexico to send 10,000 troops to their border. That is not a regime-threatening request that you're asking of Mexico. Like, the Mexican government does not believe that they will fall if they put 10,000 troops on the border. But in Egypt, last time you had elections, the Muslim Brotherhood won. And then there was a military coup, and now there's a military dictatorship where they're holding that Muslim Brotherhood down. You think they're just going to take in a bunch of people from Hamas and change around those numbers? In Jordan, you have I don't know the exact percentage split right now, but it's close to 50% of the population is Palestinian. Okay? You think the Hashemites are going to bring in another 500,000 Palestinians to give a majority, or like that much more of a majority to the it's like, these are very difficult questions to ask, but or very difficult things to actually achieve. But the idea that, look, But first of all, in theory, if the people of Gaza, if we got them, like if we gave them the option to relocate somewhere while Gaza is rebuilt and then they could move back in after, and they voluntarily wanted to do that, I'm not like necessarily opposed to that. Like if you got Egypt on board to be like, hey, we have these facilities, they can stay here until this thing is rebuilt and then they can move back. That's one thing. But if you're actually talking about, this is just blatant ethnic cleansing. If you're saying that we're just going to, against their will, we're going to force nearly 2 million people, whatever's left of that 2 million people, we're going to force them out and then make it something for Israelis to come and live in, that's just so wrong and so not our responsibility to do. It's just a disastrous proposal. Really hope that Donald Trump changes his mind on that one. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Moink. I love this company so much, especially in this current moment where I think people are waking up to what's really in our food and how you kind of can't really just trust the supermarket. You got to check out Moink, okay? Moink works with American family farmers. The business is simple. Moink meat comes from animals raised outdoors where a pig is free to be a pig. Their farmers are given an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, and they deliver meat straight to your doorstep at prices you can actually afford. If you want to get grass-fed, grass-finished beef, delicious chicken, sustainably caught wild salmon, they got a ton of different options, and you're keeping American farms going by joining the Moink movement. Join today at moinkbox.com/POTP. If you sign up today, you get a free gift in your first order. That's moinkbox.com, moinkbox.com/POTP to get fresh, delicious meat from local family farmers delivered right to your door. moinkbox.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show.
I also, there's a lack of conversation about the Israel responsibility for all the homes that they've demolished. I mean, human life is an issue, obviously, but all these people, they got lost their homes. Like, they're just returning to nothing.
Yeah.
And then when the ceasefire's over, do they got to go back to the south? They just keeps like, I don't even, you know what I mean? There's not much of a conversation here about Israel responsibility or what the plan is.
I could not agree more. All right, listen, let's move over because I just do want to make sure I get this in today. So evidently there's the No Agenda podcast with Adam Curry is the host of it. I'm not familiar with the show. I've heard of the show before, but I'm not super familiar with it. I know Adam Curry was a MTV VJ like way back in the day. But anyway, he's a podcaster now. I guess he's been in the podcast game for a long time. And they recently, I just saw this earlier today, that they were attacking Scott Horton on the show. And then I listened to it, and it was from our show. I think the last time I interviewed Scott. And so I just, look, nothing personal against these guys, but Scott Horton's my guy, and I'm simply not going to allow him to be criticized in this manner without responding. So I do want to play this. I think we can probably get through it pretty quickly. I listened to, I think, most of it, and seemed like it wasn't anything too challenging to smack down. But I wanted to be on record responding to this, because if people are going to play clips from our podcast and go after our best foreign policy guy, I think there should be a response. And honestly, just being completely honest, I think the work Scott Horton does is too important for him to need to waste his time with this. So let me just handle it, and then we can move on back to fixing the world. Okay. So here is the No Agenda podcast with Adam Curry as they start discussing the great Scott Horton.
It's kind of interesting because there's more whining and moaning and groaning from NPR.
All right.
I also have This Week in Trump. I got some Scott Horton stuff. Scott Horton stuff is interesting.
What do you want to do? You want to do? I mean, I've had enough NPR whining. You want to do?
Okay, well, this is on a podcast. This is Scott Horton, who's a writer. He did this book called Provoked. And Scott, he's a lefty, but he's of Trump's. He voted for Trump because he says right, he's and he's done a lot of books. You can look him up.
Okay, so look, man, wrong and wrong. Scott is not a lefty. He did not vote for Donald Trump. So you start this, you go, oh, this is actually really interesting. I just never quite understand these people who like they launch into a topic on a podcast and they have not familiarized themselves with the most like one Google search of Scott Horton and you'd be like, oh, he started the Libertarian Institute. So like, okay, that you would probably find that out. In fact, I think one of them is Googling as the other one's talking because they come to this in a second. But just so you guys know, no, Scott is not a lefty. No, Scott did not vote for Donald Trump. Like both. So you're just starting with you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Not the best start. Let's keep playing.
On Amazon. But he votes for Trump because he thinks the left is doing nothing but lying to him. And he sees it as such an insult. He has to vote for Trump, even though he hates him.
Right, so the trolls are saying he's...
Oh, okay. So the trolls are saying he's a libertarian is the next line. That's really funny. So someone corrects them there. They didn't even Google it to find themselves. Just one of their own listeners is like, the guy's a libertarian. Okay. First of all, just think about how Brain did that. So he goes, he's a lefty, but he voted for Trump because he says the left never stops lying to him. Well, that doesn't really sound like the way lefties usually talk. And no, he didn't vote for Donald Trump. So he voted for Donald Trump because you're already wrong because you just don't know what the fuck you're talking about. There were some of us libertarians who broke and voted for Donald Trump. I was one of them. Scott was not. So, just know something before you come at someone, especially before you come at someone as fucking brilliant as Scott Horton. Know the first goddamn thing.
It's amazing. I understand going, hey, I'm not too familiar with this person.
Sure, of course.
Let's get into what they said. And we do that quite a bit. Particularly me, I'm more guilty of that when you bring something up.
I'm doing it right now. Literally right now. Yeah. I don't know anything about Adam Curry, but I'm not like coming out going like, here's the problem with Adam Curry. He's a Buchananite paleoconservative who voted for Bill Clinton. Because like none of that's true, and why would I just say that?
And to speak so authoritatively to go, I know that he's a leftist and he specifically voted for this reason.
Yeah, not even you're right. Not even the humility to go like I think the guy's a leftist. I believe he voted for Donald Trump. You're just saying it like these are the facts, and you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. It's so goddamn embarrassing. All right, let's keep playing.
Libertarian.
Oh yeah, that's what he calls himself.
Okay.
Yeah. Libertarian by any libertarian. Yes, he's a libertarian technically, and he's one of those libertarian. Everyone was a libertarian once in their life.
That's like, why isn't libertarian someone who doesn't want to admit they're a Republican?
Or they don't want. I don't know what looking back on it, I have no idea what a libertarian's supposed to be. It's like they want to legalize drugs, and people should be free to have sex with whoever they want.
All right, so let's pause it right there.
I think that's the whole thing.
By the way, this is just true in general in political commentary. Whenever you say, I have no idea. I don't even know what. I really even have no idea. That's not the brag you think it is. That's not really, you're just saying you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. And so you're reduced to the most pathetic of straw mans of, oh, libertarian's a Republican who doesn't want to admit that he's a Republican. Oh, a libertarian, what did he say? A libertarian, they just want to legalize drugs and say you should be free to have sex with who you want to. Well, yes, we do believe in legalizing drugs. That's not something Scott Horton has ever specialized or talked about too much, I don't think. But that is true. That's the libertarian position. We also have arguments for why we believe that's the case. What is this comment about you should be free to have sex with whoever you want to? First of all, are you arguing people shouldn't be free to have sex with whoever they want? I mean, assuming we're not talking underage children here, obviously none of us agree with that. But are you arguing that should orgies be illegal or should homosexuality be illegal? Like what's the counter argument to that? Actually, that's not just a libertarian position. That is just every American doesn't really believe. I mean, okay, outside the tiniest sliver of fringes, it's pretty much the consensus in America that voluntary sexual acts between consenting adults should be legal. Whether they should be praised or should be promoted might be more of a contentious issue, but should be what? Are you differentiating yourself? No. All you're trying to do here is poison the well because you know nothing. You don't know who. You just found out the guy's a libertarian because one of your listeners told you that. You didn't know who he voted for. You know nothing. So you'll just poison the well by being like, he's one of these sex freaks. He's one of. Whereas I challenge you, find me one example ever in the I think the Scott Horton show is up to 6,000 episodes. Like he's been doing the show for a very long time. And then all his interviews on all the other shows, Scott Horton has done like 100,000 hours of podcasting. He's written 3 incredible books. Then he had a couple other books that were like transcribed of podcast interviews. In all of his work, find me one time where he talks about weird sex stuff. That's your challenge. There's just never a topic he's a foreign policy specialist. Occasionally he'll do an interview about like other libertarian issues that he cares about. There's a few domestic issues that he's kind of known for. Like he's known for being a real critic of Waco. You know, he was against burning babies alive, Ruby Ridge, and he's talked about OKC a bit. But like this is just nothing but like, let me get you to have a preconceived bias about who this guy is. And here we're racing up against time, so let's keep playing.
He's on CNN all the time.
I've never seen him before.
Okay, maybe.
Guys, Scott Horton is on CNN all the time. Were you guys unaware of Scott's numerous CNN appearances? Scott's never been on CNN. He's not a leftist. He didn't vote for Trump. He's never been on CNN. Like, at what point, by the way, if you're the other guys, if you're Adam Curry and you're listening to me respond to you right here, wouldn't this just be the point where you go, all right, I was kind of speaking out of my ass? You know what I mean? Like when you start with that, you're just objective claims, every single one of them wrong. How about you don't know what the fuck you're talking about? You brought up a guy who you know nothing about and you're pretending that you know anything about him. Let's keep playing.
He might be. I don't watch CNN. So let's listen to here. So he's got a lot of tidbits that are interesting. And this is him on Kushner.
He was reaffirmed in that thinking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong one. Here we go. On Kushner. Here we go.
And does Donald Trump know any reason why in the world he shouldn't just let Netanyahu, as he said, quote, finish the job? Is what he told Netanyahu the other day. Well, what do you mean by that? How about, well, we finished cleansing all of historic Palestine and we'll call it Greater Israel. How about that for finish the job? And what does Donald Trump really care? His son-in-law, I guess people don't know this. I don't know. Seems like they should talk about this every day, all the time. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, you know, the guy who was in charge of his entire Middle East policy for 4 years, is Benjamin Netanyahu's godson. The whole time when he was a young boy growing up in New York City, when Benjamin Netanyahu would come to town, he had to sleep on the couch because Benjamin Netanyahu would sleep in his bed. Google that.
Google it.
Okay? That's who Jared Kushner is. He's an Israeli agent. He's an Israeli pseudonym. He's here to represent the interests of a foreign power, and he's got Donald Trump completely pwned, like the gimp in the box on Pulp Fiction. Pwned. So Donald Trump can dress up like Pat Buchanan all he wants. He's not Pat Buchanan. He's a Zionist, and when you're a Zionist, you can't be America first.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today.
Hold on a second.
They almost got our sponsor in there, by the way. Here, hold on. Let's
people losing their ever-loving minds over Trump. You know, so Netanyahu was signing something. I don't know. They probably signed, whoever is going to own Gaza, whatever. And the president pulls out the chair and then pushes it in as Netanyahu sits down. And the online rage when something like this. Trump is Netanyahu's slave.
Yeah, so let's pause that for a second here. God, man, no agenda. I mean, listen, I don't know about your I've never listened to your podcast. I'm not saying you have a bad podcast. Maybe it's a good podcast. I don't know. This is so goddamn cringy and embarrassing. Okay, Rob, this is how bad it is, okay? Because literally all the stuff I just said to you about how much they get it wrong, and I didn't even really know. So I'm listening to this clip first, and then when I hear me start reading the ad, I'm like, oh yeah, this was on our show. I had forgot. I didn't even realize they were playing an episode from our show. So now he responds and he goes, look, dude, this is what happens. Trump has Netanyahu over. He pulls the chair, puts it back in. He says, hey, maybe we take over Gaza, floats out this idea, and now everyone's losing their mind about how he's an Israeli spy. Wrong. I haven't had Trump on since that. I haven't had Scott Horton on since Trump floated out that proposal. That's not what we were talking about, dude. You're wrong on this isn't an opinion. It isn't like, I think you got this wrong. Objectively, you've gotten it all wrong so far. All wrong. Now, if you wanted to pick apart one thing that Scott Horton said there, he's being hyperbolic, not literal. So when he says he's his godson. Jews don't have godsons. But you can read in the New York Times about how Jared Kushner got kicked out of his own bed when Bibi Netanyahu came to stay at his house. He's right about this. So after you guys getting everything objectively wrong, you just sit there and giggle. Like, this is what they're all reduced. It's another Jonah Goldberg. They're reduced to being a 16-year-old girl. They just giggle through what he's saying. They're not arguing with anything he said. They're arguing that he's just reacting to Donald Trump's Gaza proposal. Well, he's reacting to it 3 weeks before he made the proposal. So no, how do you not just feel stupid? No, I'm sorry. Maybe there's some people out there who like this show. Maybe they make some good points on some other things. I have absolutely no idea. I have nothing but respect for all former MTV VJs. Long live the great Kennedy. But this is embarrassing, dude. You've got this all wrong objectively. Let's just play the end of it, and then I'm gonna have to wrap up here.
Boy, look at him. He's holding his chair for him. I'm like, Trump. He's a hospitality guy. He makes sure you have mints on your pillow at night. I'm sure that, but everyone's yeah.
Our take on this is from the get-go is from the intelligence side, which is that we run Israel. They don't run us.
Exactly.
And once you get past this, what this guy just, he's a spy for Israel, blah, blah, blah. That's bull crap. But if you want to believe that because you're a libertarian writer, even though you don't even notice what you're writing, for example, the book he just came out with, which was Provoked.
Or if you're on Mastodon, yes.
Or if you're yeah. Mm-hmm. The book about Provoked is about how we provoked the Russians to take over Ukraine. It's got all the stuff we've talked about on this show for years. You know, the Maidan, the whole thing.
Well, that's what a Zionist would say, John.
And so, yes, exactly. And so, the way these guys don't have, they don't know who, they think the tail's wagging the dog. Well, no, the dog is wagging the tail. So let's get over that. But okay, you can think what you want. Meanwhile, what I thought was interesting.
Here, just pause it real quick. His only argument here is that he's not arguing with anything Scott actually said. He's not really making an argument. When he's saying the tail's wagging the dog, no, actually the dog's wagging the tail. He's just saying that, like, America is controlling Israel. Israel isn't controlling America. Again, you can't really debate with any of the specifics that Scott's arguing with here. And there are lots of examples where America is actually, to some degree, controlling Israel or exuding influence on Israel. The elections, I think, in Gaza in 2005 was not a neocon Zionist project. I think that was much more of Condoleezza Rice spreading democracy to the world type project. There are examples but there's clearly a million examples too of where, no, actually Israel has, the tail has been wagging the dog. And where there are presidents of the United States of America, multiple presidents who want a certain policy done and cannot get their way because actually Israel's influence is stronger than the president's in some ways. So again, all just not, after getting everything wrong and not knowing what you're talking about, now they're just making an assertion that's not even really a 100% correct assertion. When he said Scott was just making the points of all the things they've talked about on the show and they've talked about Maidan, and it's like, okay, so Scott's also been making those points for many years before he wrote the book about it. Again, that's just not a point. Then I guess you would say you agree on this. Anyway, let's keep playing.
Thing from this guy that thinks a little more. He's irked about Woodward, who's another
spy
agent, a spy,
spook. Yes.
Oh, pause it for a second.
I thought this was worth.
Bob Woodward came from naval intelligence, and as a young man in his 20s, was given the Watergate story. He was given the biggest story in the world as a young 20-something-year-old right out of naval intelligence. Is it that crazy to refer to him as a spook or a spy? I don't know. Again, they never have an argument. It's always just a mocking tone of voice. Like, I don't know any of the facts. I don't have an argument, but I'm just going to kind of laugh through everything you say, repeat back to you. The name of the book is Provoked. Is that supposed to substitute for an intelligent thought? Because it's not doing it for me. All right, let's keep playing. And then
listening to, and this is Scott Provoked on Woodward. It's a two-parter.
He was reaffirmed in that thinking, watching the fall of Afghanistan and how indecisive Biden was in finishing out the withdrawal.
He's talking about Putin.
Yeah. not withdrawing at all, but just botching it the way he did. And, the Bob Woodward book, the new Bob Woodward book, has quotes from the high-level intelligence officials saying that they assessed that they even claimed, I think, to have sources in Russia saying this was part of their thinking, was that Afghanistan made Biden look so weak that they thought, yeah, we could definitely press our advantage now. But the problem is, you got to throw out that whole Bob Woodward book because he's got a big fake quote of Sergei Lavrov on page 88. And then the whole book, the whole point of a Bob Woodward book is he has quotes from people that nobody else can talk to, but he gets interviews with. But so if he's lying about a quote that I can check on the OSCE website, then what is he saying when he's quoting Blinken and Sullivan and the rest of these people? Like, if they don't dispute all the quotes, then I'm supposed to accept them or something. I don't know. I just can't. I started to write a note in my book because I had actually, you know what, man, in that book, there's all kinds of quotes of Biden saying how right I am about everything. Like, I started quoting some good stuff in there. And Avril Haines, the DNI, I had them admitting, oh, yeah, Horton's right after all, blah, 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 all over the place. And I had to cut all those quotes out. Once I got to the part where Woodward's lying to me, I started to write in the footnotes, well, you got to kind of take these with a grain of salt. And I'm like, well, I can't put quotes that you got to take with a grain of salt in the book. We're like, I got to disclaim, even though he is the most prominent journalist in America. But like, he just happened to have a quote in there. And I happen to be writing a book about this. I have the Lavrov quote already. I know what he said. So when I read the live version of it, I'm like, hey, I know that quote. And that's not right.
I can't wait to subscribe to this podcast.
Yeah.
Wow. Riveting stuff.
Can you maybe focus a little more instead of, yammering like that? But okay. So the second part of it, he explains a little more in detail, but then there's a kind of a kicker about Amazon taking his commentary off the site.
And so it's page 88 if anybody wants to check this out. And also Amazon removed my review about this, saying that I claimed I got an inauthentic copy of the book. That's not what I said. I said there's a fake quote on page 88. So I had a great 1-star review on there and they took it down. And there's now all the 1-star reviews are my book was torn or whatever, and no criticism of the actual substance of the thing. But if anyone wants to check, the quote is the playing with fire quote of Lavrov on page 88. If anybody, I'm not selling it. If anybody already has the new Woodward book, and then go and check the OSCE websites from December. I'm pretty sure December 2nd, 2021, but certainly December 2021. And you'll find the quote from Sergei Lavrov playing with fire. And you'll see how Bob Woodward turns the meaning of the quote entirely upside down to he's saying essentially it's so reckless the way you guys completely disregard our opinion about your expansion of the NATO alliance. And then he butchers the quote into saying Lavrov is saying that America has no right to decide who should be in its alliance or not, which of course makes no sense whatsoever because that's not what he said. The whole thing is stupid. But anyway, point just being, you can't trust Bob Woodward to tell you a quote right.
Wow. Okay. That was revealing. Season of reveal.
Well, of course, we've been saying this for what?
Since day one.
Since Legacy of, not Legacy of Ashes, but Family of Secrets.
Yes, Family of Secrets. That's right.
Which was brought out that Bob Woodward came out of, that was Navy intelligence, I think.
Yeah.
And he's basically
I thought you just mocked the idea of calling him a spook or a spy. Am I So that's your criticism after all of that. Scott Horton is sitting here on our show. By the way, yeah, you should subscribe to the show. You could learn something. I know you don't like when people are ranting or something like that. I'm sorry, we're not just making bullshit up and claiming we know stuff about people and are objectively wrong. Scott's going... Literally what he's saying here is just talking about what a meticulous writer he is and how he's an honest enough actor that he goes, look, there was this Bob Woodward book that had all these great quotes that was proving my case. He goes, but then I found this one Sergei Lavrov quote and he's totally lying about it. And so here's the real one. Here's the one. And then he goes, once he does that, I go, I can't use any of these because I can't trust you're not a liar. And their big critique at the end of that is just, we've been saying he was a liar for a long time. Okay, fine. So you've been saying it for a long time. And now someone far smarter than you, who's a far better researcher, is saying it to more people. Seems like a win. Well, listen, I'll say this. You don't have to subscribe to the podcast, but no agenda, guys. Open invite. If you want to come on the show, we can argue about Scott Horton or any of the stuff if you want to, but just do a little bit of research first. Get a few facts down, because otherwise you're going to get embarrassed. Anyway, sorry, I just can't have people coming at my guy Scott Horton like that, especially when they have nothing. It's amazing, Rob, that people will do a segment about stuff like this and have nothing. All right, we're way over time. I got to wrap. We're back. Thank you guys all for watching, listening, and we'll catch you tomorrow with a brand new episode. Peace.